Hello all, I'm Marja and you're listening to the LC Podcast. And this is where we delve into the philosophical, spiritual, and dabble into the political. This podcast is typically given in a lecture style, hence the lecture center, because we like to arouse the mind, thereby provoking thought. And thought isn't something that people exercise these days. People instead are driven by impulses and fleeting emotions that cause them to act out of irrationality and fear. And friends, that's where I want to go with this talk. I'd like to address something that seems to be constantly rearing its ugly head from the deep, dark web that is social media. Yes, we use it. Yes, we love it. But we all know that social media has a dark side, and we can't seem to get a break from it. Not 1 week or a month or even a minute, we're inundated with pictures, videos, and reports of man's inhumanity to man. And we're coming out of a stupor. And this stupor is what I call us being desensitized. Yes, we're inundated with so many images every single day. The mind doesn't even know what to do with all of these images, and we are really desensitized. We hear about shootings, mass shootings constantly, and it's like we don't even know what to feel anymore. I don't know what to feel. You don't know what to feel. We feel, but then we don't feel. But then we do feel, because we've been seeing things lately that we have never seen before in the Western world. And we're now beginning to question why these things are happening, why we're seeing what we're seeing, why are we seeing people being lit on fire, human beings? Why are we seeing beatings, people getting angry, doing bad things on a regular basis? We are beginning to ask why. And there is a genuineness. This is not just some, oh God, why is this happening? No. People really want to know. They really want to truly understand what the problem is. And that's what this podcast is really about, friends. This podcast is about the fall of civilization. It is about barbarism. And this is an introductory podcast to my On the Brink series, and it's really this civilization on the brink. Friends, on the brink of collapse. That's what we're talking about. And so this podcast is going to be somewhat, and it really is an intro to the series. So let's talk about what I'm referring to when I say we really want to understand what this problem is and what's happening in the world. And perhaps I need to use examples. Well, I suppose we can start with the proliferation of mass shootings, as I spoke of, gang beatdowns, I also spoke of that, and sexual violence against women and children. Now, I failed to mention rampant stealing and mental illness. Friends, that's happening in the inner cities. And it's rampant. It's very serious. But at least now that I've mentioned all of this, we have some clarity. So there's nothing really ambiguous. Now you know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about when I refer to civility and incivility. And that's important because ambiguity and the use of euphemistic language is being intentionally used to conceal this dark side of mankind. And not only is this the dark nature of man, I should say the dark nature of man that's taking center stage. And I say that because it's really being highlighted and brought to our attention in social media. It is indeed the reality. It is a reality. And this reality has been brought to our attention because what we're seeing is the debasement of mankind. And we're witnessing the amorality that is overtaking the culture. See, we've been told that the demoralization of man is caused by society. In other words, socioeconomics and systemic racism are the chief causes of moral degradation and the erosion of cultural values. For years, we accepted this argument. We thought it made sense because we see that there are people who seem to not be thriving. There are people who seem to be left behind. There are people that are just unevolved. These people are called the oppressed, and they are the downtrodden. And there seems to be no justifiable reason, or should I say, no way to truly explain why some people are doing well and others are not progressing at all. So this state that they're in has been attributed to society. It's their fault. It's your fault. It's my fault. It's not the individual's fault. It's society's fault. And so the left accuses the white patriarchy of all the injustices and moral evils perpetuated, or should I say, perpetrated, I'll say that, against people of color across the globe. White men are said to be the most violent, most greedy, and most murderous. White men have been branded as the face and cause of all evils. And there is no redemption. Because these people, those people who hold these beliefs do not think that whites have any redeeming qualities. Suffice to say, most whites don't know. They don't know this. And even if they did know, I don't even think they would want to believe it. They think that if they align themselves with people of color and advocate for them, they'll be known as the decent white people, the acceptable whites, the good whites. Oh boy. They have no idea. They have no idea what black people say about them behind closed doors. White people, you need to know this. I don't care what you do for people of color. You will never be appreciated or accepted as an equal by the vast majority of them. Now, I'm not speaking on behalf of all people of color. I speak for the ones that I know about. And there are more of those than you think. The only reason they accept your charity in all its forms is because they like the idea that you're in a place of submission. They also like that they can use you by exploiting your resources. Or exploiting you for resources, I should say. But those whites, those of you who advocate for DEI, CRT, reparations, and also BLM, you like to be the token white. Because it makes you look like the good guy. It makes you look better than your ancestors. And that's really all this is about. It's not real. This is not any kind of real thing coming from a real place. It's false humility. And at this point, I'm sure those of you hearing this already know about this, and you may even believe this because it is seemingly the only explanation for man's failure to thrive. In a world where seemingly, I said seemingly, the white race is prosperous beyond measure. You see, the belief is that whoever has the power controls the destiny of the people. But the problem with this kind of thinking is that it negates and reduces man to a powerless individual who cannot self-determine. And it also, this kind of thinking rather, simultaneously absolves man of his accountability for his thoughts and actions. Man basically has agency or moral authority, but he's being told that he doesn't. And if a man is in this state, he can't be held liable for his lack of accomplishment and even his crimes against his fellow men. Why? Because it's all the fault of the white man. You see, for years, people of color, mainly blacks, have made the argument that because they have no power, no economic power, no political power, no social power or socioeconomic power, they're just not at fault. they've actually said to me, I've had these conversations with them, that white men flooded black communities with drugs and guns, and blacks, we just don't have access to wholesale arms or drugs. And because the black community does not have access, that means they're not at fault. Even though they may have actually pulled triggers and committed drug-related and gang-related crimes in their own neighborhoods. You see, the overall destruction of their community was simply not their fault. But how could that be the case? You see, I've always countered this pathetic argument by saying, can the white man force a needle in your vein? Did he pull the trigger? Who did that? What we're really talking about here are people who refuse to accept accountability for their actions, because for one, that would mean that they would have to mature and take on adult responsibility like the rest of us. And also, there would be no devil to blame but themselves. And you see, the devil, or the divided consciousness of man, is not a demon. The devil denotes man's refusal to see himself as an agent of cause, the cause of his own life and his own problems. Not only this, man refuses to acknowledge his moral degradation because he knows that he's inferior to those that have developed inward principle, which is virtue. It is the inherent nature of man to be predisposed to evil. Evil is not relegated to a race or religion. It lives in the hearts of all men because it is necessary for the cultivation of goodness. The issue, and I know I'm saying a lot, and the moral dilemma that man must face is that he fails to grow and learn about how to live morally upright. And because of this, he lives a debased life. This is the life that will drag him down to a place of moral despair and inner suffering. And this is human nature, friends. I recently said on X that we need to revisit the humanities studies because classic works of literature in conjunction with history reveal the hidden truths of the dark side of humanity. It's that part of us that Jung called the shadow, the motivation and inspiration for the character Hannibal Lecter in The Silence of the Lambs. That horror story exposed the grotesque, depraved condition that is inherently a part of the human sub-story. And this is what we need to be talking about. We can enact policies and vote all day. Those things will not ensure our existence well into the future. Friends, it must be understood that good character, men of virtue, and true goodness, friends, true goodness, not false humility, are what hold a civilization intact. Civilization of the past, or should I say civilizations of the past, did not fall due to economic and political reasons. Friends, that was not the underlying cause. That was what was documented and what we could see in appearances and what it seemed like. And of course, the theory that past civilizations fell due to economics and political reasons were based on empirical evidence. I get that. But spiritual philosophy can tell us what empiricism cannot, because it deals with the inner workings of mankind. That's what you can't see with your eyes. You see, it's not based or rooted in forming judgments based on the finite and vain interpretations of man. It's about the impersonal, objective truths that are undeniable and exist not simply for the men of antiquity, but the entirety of humanity. So what we're talking about is a timeless knowledge that applies to all men at all times. So we don't need to know about what ancient Rome's political affiliation was or how much their currency was worth before the collapse. All we need to know is what enabled them to erect one of the greatest civilizations that we know that existed in the modern world. That is what we need to understand. And the resounding question is, how do we address this cultural problem of barbarism? Friends, this is a very real problem that you may think you can simply run away from and turn the other cheek. Oh, that works temporarily. Because as you can see, it's like a disease. It spreads in the most unlikely places among the most unlikely of people. And that's because it has its origins in the repression and suppression of what, I should say, the desires of men. You see, we're told as children by our parents, guardians, priests, pastors, and so forth to be nice. Remember that? Be nice. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. So we're taught to hold back. We're taught to give to those in need, to be courteous, to have manners, and to be polite. And that, we are told, constitutes civility. I can't tell you how many people think that to be civil means to exhibit kind gestures. And a gesture is just that. It doesn't mean that one is civil because he can be nice in public. Oh, friends, civility is much deeper than that. It involves transforming the lower nature of a person. And this lower nature is the part of you that takes pleasure in the failures of others. Yeah. That's the part of you that's jealous. That's the part of you that wants to see somebody fall flat on their face. That's the part of you that maybe you wish you could be happy for somebody, but for some reason you just can't find it in you because you're not happy with yourself. Yeah, that's the dark side. That's the lower nature. And that's the part of you that desires to have something that others have. Something that you are lacking in yourself. Therefore, it is the covetous nature of man. And covetousness lives in the heart of all of us. We have all experienced feeling that way. We have all experienced wanting something that our friends have, our family, has, or we all have experienced that. And there's no shame in that. But as I mentioned, we are taught to suppress those thoughts because we're told it's wrong to feel that way. And I'm not saying that it's right to feel that way. I'm just saying that it's part of our nature to feel that way. What's wrong is going against or trying to suppress our nature. That is what fuels evil. I really want to emphasize this fact, and I want to emphasize the fact that a person, not his race, not his religion, not his nationality, not any of that, a person is his character. And I'm not saying this to say that there exists no collective sins. This is interesting because culture is shared and values can be shared. And that is why we see that certain racial, ethnic, and religious groups act according to what they deem as acceptable in their culture. But that doesn't mean we still cannot look at the individual for who that person is, even the individual within the group or within the collective. Because you see, a person can only be known by his individual character. And the evidence is in the way he lives. And we still must set aside individual people from their group. Friends, we have to do this, because if we fail to do that, we fail to know that it is possible to teach individuals how to uplift themselves from a degraded state. So when we examine why people don't act in good conduct, we need to look at their character. And if we do this, we will determine why they act in a degraded way. And why is such an important question for me? Because to ask that question opens up the entire mind. It opens it up to possibilities, limitless possibilities. When we begin to question why, we will begin to understand that what people do to others, how they treat them, is a reflection of their own self-worth. And that's what morality is. It's really about how one treats himself. And of course, there's another question. This question really should be asked. And that question is, why is it that we're not really doing anything about this? What do I mean? Listen, if you don't live in a big city, you may not be experiencing this. You may not be seeing this. You may not see mentally ill people roaming the streets. You may not experience open air drug use, public lewdness, sex in the street. You aren't seeing this. Lucky you. This is a major problem. And the current political policies are fueling it. There are people who believe that freedom means allowing people to live on a debased level. Just live and let live. That's what they think freedom is. These people also believe that doing the right thing means not interfering with people's so-called rights, even if what they're doing is destroying the quality of life for the majority. So that's what I'm asking. Why are we allowing this? And to put it simply, it's because we're relying on politicians to do something, but they repeatedly show us that they won't. There are people, there are advocates, NGOs who back the politicians. And there is a lot of money that is being appropriated to NGOs, which means non-governmental organizations. So why would politicians or NGOs want to solve the problem of homelessness when they're receiving millions to operate their organizations? Friends, it's not happening. As for politicians, funding NGOs makes them look good. They look like they're doing the right thing. Here we go again, false humility. People just want to look like they're doing the right thing. They don't actually want to be in the right. They just want to look like they are. You see, evil masquerades as something good. The real evil is hypocrisy. Our fellow men who are running wild in the streets, brawling, shooting drugs, robbing stores, committing homicides, are acting according to their barbaric nature. And yes, I do believe they need to be stopped. We know who they are. We know what they are. That's what's interesting about it. They're not hiding their moral degradation. They're not living in hypocrisy. They're living true to their nature. But those who hide and pretend to do good and be good, I call them the moralists. I talk about them all the time. Those of you who listen to me know how I feel about the do-gooders, otherwise known as the moralists. They're the real problem, and they're the ones who, instead of helping the mentally ill, the homeless, the criminally insane, they're the ones allowing them to terrorize the law-abiding. Have you noticed that whenever the rational-minded people question why criminal behavior is not being dealt with, they're bombarded with severe backlash? They are actually being attacked. They're being attacked. Imagine that. And then back to the white people. White people have been vilified to the point of questioning their morality. They've been told that they're all racist, that it's inherent in them and they don't even know it. Oh my God. That's the most vile and evil teaching. It's just evil. But I realize why they're saying it. They're saying it for the purpose of causing a kind of psychological repression that causes people, maybe even a reverse psychology, that causes people to question their own integrity and doubt everything they've always known to be true. This is why it is of the utmost importance for you to be anchored not to the status quo, but to your own principles. Who cares what society's doing? Society is made up of fickle people who want to shape and mold the world to fit their sick agenda. And they do this by trying to force you to compromise your integrity. So this is all coming to a head, and how is this so? It's because you let the world tell you what to accept and what not to accept. You abandoned your own principles and values, if you even had them to begin with. But I believe you did, because you knew what was right, but they told you that what you thought was right was wrong. You let them get in your head and dismantle your entire value system. What kind of culture is this? What's wrong with the left? Why are the mentally ill roaming the streets? Why are there videos showing blacks constantly brawling in your X feed? The world, it seems, is wasting away. But everybody wants to blame everybody else, but they don't want to look at themselves. You see, you didn't know that you play a role in the human condition. Let me say this again. When a civilization is facing an imminent collapse, it's because the civilized have failed to act. The civilized and so-called morally upright are the ones who must take the helm. I don't know who they're looking for. I guess they're looking for law enforcement to do it, but law enforcement has their hands tied. So who's going to do it? You see what's happening in New York City with the mayoral race. Do I need to go political on you people today? But nobody's doing anything. Nobody's taking any action. No one's taking the helm. You see, what has happened is we have allowed the morally bankrupt to tell us what to do and how to live. And this is why we have amoral politicians in the House of the people drawing up policies as I speak that are destructive to our civil liberties and quality of life. We allow it. We don't take to the streets. We don't make demands. We don't boycott. And we don't use the media. We keep looking to self-seeking politicians to do the right thing, but they can't. Friends, the hypocrisy that I've been talking about is evil. It's overt. We know what it is, and covert. I've also said this many times. Evil is not a face. It's not a color. It's something you can't see because it masquerades as something good. I say all of this to bring home a point that is not only that barbarism is the original and inherent condition of mankind, but also that man can transcend it through education. You see, many moons ago, it was known that education was meant for the purpose of civilizing mankind. That was many moons ago. But as you know, all of this has changed. Education nowadays is for the purpose of getting a job or specializing in a career field, and that's basically it. Parents, for the most part, are no longer really concerned about raising children who will do their part and contribute to the world and be good citizens. I mean, I question that all the time. Whatever happened to being a decent human? Who cares about that? Friends, what needs to happen is this. The entire educational system needs to go. It's an epic failure, and it's antiquated. Our children are ill prepared for life and their future, and teachers are burned out. Pedagogical methods are just simply ineffective at this point. And in order to drastically reform our society, we must allow for classes that help students understand their reason for school and why they needed to help position them in the world. You see, most people have no interest in school because it is disconnected from its original purpose. We, mankind, are disconnected from our purpose, and we've become lost. We're a lost generation. And that's why we worship the material world. The material world is deeply connected to our sense of self-worth. And I told you, where there's a lack of self-worth, there's moral decay. It's inevitable. Those who are at their lowest level live a debased and self-destructive life. That's what we are witnessing, people. That's what we're witnessing. There are those who just don't care about themselves or their fellow men. However, With all of that said, I have hope because I know that revamping education can restore civilization. And I know what needs to be done because I've developed a framework for an entirely new system that does away with indoctrination, CRT, antiquated subjects, impractical lessons and teaching that are doing nothing to advance mankind. What we need is education that works to uplift. Students must clearly understand why they're in school and how what they learn is contributing to the generations in the future. I feel like they need to understand that contribution and advancement is essential for our survival as human beings. Now, this is an unconventional approach to education, and it's also a nuanced approach, and I strongly believe that many people will be on board with this once they see the framework and they truly understand what is at stake, because honestly, I don't think people realize where we are. We are on the brink. Friends, civilization is on the brink of collapse. And I'm going to be talking about that in the next few episodes. And I want you to join me. Friends, this has been quite the journey, and you came along for the ride. I greatly appreciate that. I always say this: if you like this content and you yearn for more, please feel free to leave a comment on some of our handles. You can find us on X, YouTube, Rumble, Substack, and Medium. I truly look forward to hearing from you. Until next time.